My world stopped the moment I heard the scream. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, HOA Karen's wedding. Yet, in the middle of the decorated church hallway, she grabbed my 11-year-old son by the collar and slammed him so hard into the wall that the flowers on the table shook and collapsed. His small body hit the marble with a crack that echoed louder than the wedding music. Guests froze. The bride's veil swung behind her as she hissed, "Stay away from my daughter's dress, you filthy boy." Even though he hadn't touched anything, my son slid down the wall, gasping, dizzy, his nose bleeding while Karen's forced smile returned as she walked toward the ceremony like nothing happened. But what Karen didn't know was that someone recorded the whole attack. And once that footage surfaced, her perfect wedding day would explode into a nightmare that shocked everyone. Before we dive into this shocking story, I want to speak directly to everyone watching. Which city are you watching this video from? Drop your city name in the comments. I love seeing people from all across the USA tuning in. And before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button because the truth you're about to hear will shake you, anger you, and keep you glued till the very end. Now, let me take you back to the wedding day that changed everything. My son and I attended HOA Karen's ceremony out of pure respect for her mother, who had always been kind to our family. The hall was glowing with candles, soft music, guests laughing, and white roses lined down the aisle. It looked like a picture-perfect celebration until it wasn't. No one could have predicted that behind Karen's wide smile and glittering gown, she was hiding a vicious temper ready to explode. My son was simply walking past the hallway, holding the small gift he had bought with his own allowance, when his innocent step became a spark to Karen's monstrous outburst. And while the guests were too shocked or too intimidated to intervene, my son lay trembling against the wall, fighting back tears. I had no idea any of this had happened, not yet. I was sitting inside the hall, waiting for the ceremony to begin, having no clue that my child had just been assaulted by the bride herself. But what Karen did next, and what someone secretly recorded, would blow the lid off her perfect image, expose her darkest secrets, and trigger a chain of events that nobody at that wedding was prepared for. So let's begin, because the truth starts right here. The moment everything began unraveling was so quiet, so ordinary, that no one could have predicted the explosion that followed. My son, Ethan, had always been the calm, gentle type, the kind of 11-year-old who apologized when someone else bumped into him. He held the small box wrapped in blue paper, the wedding gift he'd saved up for, and walked through the long hallway of the church, admiring the white candles flickering against the cream-colored walls. The music hadn't started yet. The guests were still taking their seats, murmuring softly, while staff rushed around adjusting centerpieces and fluffing roses. Karen, the bride, stood near a full-length mirror checking her veil. Her dress was a heavy satin gown that swept the floor, and 3 bridesmaids stood around her, fanning her, fixing her train, praising her like she was a queen. Even from where Ethan stood, he could hear her sharp voice snapping orders. "Don't touch it like that. You'll wrinkle it. And keep the flowers higher, no higher." She had always been dramatic, but today she was outright unbearable. Ethan didn't want to catch her attention, so he hugged the wall and tried to slip past quietly, but fate seemed determined to betray him. One of the decorators, adjusting a large vase, clipped the corner of the stand, causing it to wobble just enough for a single rose petal to fall. It floated down harmlessly and landed near the hem of Karen's gown. That was all it took. Karen whipped around, eyes blazing, as if the petal were a personal insult. "Who did that?" she hissed. Everyone froze. The bridesmaids exchanged nervous glances. Then Karen's gaze locked onto Ethan, the only person in the hallway not wearing wedding attire. In an instant, her anger found a target. "You," she snarled. "Get away from my dress." Ethan blinked, confused. I wasn't even—" He didn't even get the sentence out. Karen stormed toward him, her heels clacking like tiny gunshots on the marble. Her face twisted in rage, her perfectly done makeup cracking around her eyes. "You disgusting little brat," she spat. Children shouldn't be anywhere near my wedding. Ethan, startled and overwhelmed, instinctively stepped back, gripping the small gift box tighter. I didn't touch anything, he whispered, voice trembling. But Karen didn't want the truth. She wanted someone to destroy. Before he could move again, she grabbed him by the front of his shirt, her manicured nails digging into his skin, and shoved him backward with so much force that his feet left the ground for a split second. His back slammed into the wall with a sickening thud that echoed through the hallway. The vase beside him shook violently, petals scattered everywhere. One bridesmaid gasped and covered mouth. Another whispered, "Karen, stop!" Ethan collapsed to the floor, dazed, his vision blurring as pain shot through his spine. His nose began to bleed, a thin red line trailing down to his lip. He tried to sit up, but his arms trembled too much to support him. Karen didn't even look remorseful. In fact, she seemed relieved, as if throwing a child into a wall had somehow fixed her problem. "That's what you get for ruining my dress," she sneered, brushing imaginary dust off her gown. "Stay on the ground where you belong." A few guests who had witnessed the attack stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing happened. After all, Karen's family was powerful in the HOA, and they had a reputation for destroying people who crossed them. So they stayed silent. But silence didn't stop guilt. One elderly woman clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. A younger man pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages, but actually recording everything from behind a floral arrangement. He was the only one brave enough to capture the truth. Ethan's breathing became shallow as he leaned against the wall, still clutching the gift he had chosen so carefully. Tears welled in his eyes, not just from pain but humiliation. He had come to celebrate someone else's happiness, not to be attacked by the bride. And while Karen turned around, straightened her veil, and walked back toward her bridesmaids, the entire hallway felt colder, darker, heavier. Her bridesmaids tried to whisper something to her. Maybe advice, maybe concern, but Karen raised one finger sharply, signaling them to shut up. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes, she said through clenched teeth. "I don't want to hear another sound." Then she forced on her wedding smile, the smile she had practiced for months, and walked toward the back doors leading to the chapel. No one dared stop her. Inside the church, I was still completely unaware. I sat in the third row, tapping my foot absent-mindedly, waiting for my son to return from the hallway. I remember checking my watch, thinking he was taking too long, but I assumed he had gotten distracted by something. I had no idea that he was lying on the cold floor, holding his ribs, struggling to breathe through the shock. Karen stepped through the doors moments later, her expression smooth and controlled, as if nothing had happened. But the bridesmaid behind her kept looking back nervously, her eyes wide, guilt written all over her face. She knew something horrible had just happened, and she knew it wasn't over. Because the boy Karen had assaulted wasn't just a guest. He was my son, and the moment I found out, the wedding would become a battleground no one could have imagined. The moment I stepped out of the chapel to look for Ethan, I felt something was wrong, an instinct that tightened my chest before I even saw him. The hallway was strangely quiet, the decorations slightly disturbed, petals scattered across the floor like a storm had passed. And then I spotted him slumped against the wall, his small hands shaking, blood trickling from his nose onto the blue gift box he still refused to drop. My heart stopped. "Ethan!" I rushed forward, dropping to my knees beside him as he winced in pain. His voice came out in a broken whisper. "Dad, I didn't do anything. She pushed me." That single word, she, lit a fire inside me I had never felt before. I scanned the hallway, looking for whoever had hurt my child, and as if fate wanted me to know the truth, immediately one of the bridesmaids stepped forward, trembling. "Sir, it was Karen," she admitted softly, her eyes darting toward the chapel doors. She slammed him into the wall, really hard. For a moment, the world slowed. The bride slammed my son into a wall. On her wedding day, while smiling for her perfect photos. My voice turned cold. "Call 911. Guests gasped. The reality of the situation sank in fast. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. He clutched his ribs, trying not to cry. His face had begun to swell on one side. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, their radios crackling as they kneeled beside him. Possible concussion, one said. Check his ribs, too. He's guarding the left side. They lifted him onto a stretcher, and Ethan reached for my hand, terrified. I held on. I'm right here, buddy. I'm not leaving. As they loaded him into the ambulance, whispers spread through the church like wildfire. Guests peered from behind pews, shocked, confused, afraid of what this meant for the bride's reputation. And in the middle of the chaos, Karen emerged, still in her wedding gown, still wearing that plastic-perfect smile, but her eyes flickered with panic when she realized everyone was looking at her. She strutted forward, hands on her hips, and hissed, "Oh, please, he's faking it." He threw himself into the wall, probably looking for attention. My blood boiled. "You assaulted my son," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You laid your hands on an 11-year-old child." Karen rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. He got too close to my dress and tripped." "He didn't trip," the same bridesmaid whispered, stepping closer. "We saw what you did." Karen snapped around, venom in her voice. "You saw nothing. Do you understand me?" But the bridesmaid didn't back down this time. "Karen, you grabbed him. You shoved him. You hurt him." The hallway fell dead silent. Karen's face twisted, a mixture of fear and fury, as she realized her own bridesmaid had betrayed her. "Delete that recording," Karen suddenly barked. Everyone froze. "Recording?" My heart raced. I scanned the crowd until a young man hesitantly stepped forward, phone in hand. "You recorded it?" I asked, barely breathing. He nodded. I didn't think she'd actually hurt the kid, but when she did, I couldn't just ignore it. Karen lunged toward him, screaming, "Give me that phone," but he backed up quickly. "Don't you dare delete it," I warned him. "That video is evidence." The wedding day had officially collapsed. Guests began shifting away from Karen, whispering, some shaking their heads in disgust. For the first time, she wasn't the queen of the HOA. She was a criminal standing in a hallway full of witnesses, and yet she still tried to spin the narrative. "You don't understand," she said loudly, desperation cracking her voice. "This will ruin everything. My marriage. My reputation. You did that yourself," someone muttered. I didn't wait for more. I ran to the ambulance just as they were closing the doors. "We're taking him to County Medical," the paramedic said. "Follow us." At the hospital, the hours stretched into an agonizing blur. Ethan underwent x-rays, CT scans, neurological checks. Every time he flinched, I felt myself drowning in guilt and fury. When the doctor finally returned, his face was serious. "Your son has a mild concussion, 2 bruised ribs, and significant soft tissue trauma along his back. Someone hit him hard." My jaw clenched. Someone didn't hit him. The bride of the wedding we attended assaulted him. The doctor sighed. "We're required to report this to authorities." "Good," I said. Meanwhile, Karen arrived at the hospital, still in her wedding gown, demanding to clear her name. She marched up to the nurse's station and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm the victim here. That brat is lying." Security had to escort her back as she shouted, "He threw himself. He wanted to ruin my wedding." But Karen didn't know something crucial. The video of her assault had already been shared with the hospital security officer, and he had forwarded it to the police. When 2 officers walked toward her, she paled. "Mrs. Karen Hill?" "It's bride," she corrected reflexively. "You're required to come with us for questioning. There's evidence of a physical assault on a minor." Her voice cracked. "No, not today. Not on my wedding day." "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "you don't get to schedule accountability." Karen tried to run in her gown and her heels, but slipped on the polished floor, crashing into a wheelchair. Her veil went flying. Hospital visitors gasped. Cameras from phones were already recording. Karen's perfect wedding day had officially turned into the biggest public humiliation of her life. And it was only the beginning, because once investigators dug into her past, they would uncover something far more sinister, a truth the entire community had ignored for years. A truth that was about to explode. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time Karen was escorted out of the hospital's main lobby, the entire waiting area had turned into a buzzing hive of whispers, gasps, and people lifting their phones to capture the unbelievable fall of the HOA's most feared woman. News travels quickly in small communities, especially when a main character is someone who has terrorized neighbors for years. Within an hour, local residents, HOA members, and even former victims began flooding social media with comments, photos, and stories they had kept hidden out of fear. She bullied my daughter for chalk drawings. Karen fined us $300 because our flowers weren't symmetrical. She screamed at a 9-year-old for riding a bike on the sidewalk. Suddenly, the woman who once controlled the entire neighborhood with an iron fist was standing alone, mascara running down her cheeks, veil tangled around her arm, and her reputation collapsing like a house of cards. And I watched it all unfold as I sat next to Ethan's hospital bed, my hand wrapped around his, listening to him breathe softly while he slept. The doctor had given him pain medication, so he drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally wincing when the bruised ribs shifted. Every time he stirred, my chest tightened. My son had been attacked, humiliated, and traumatized on a day that wasn't even ours. And the woman who did it was desperately trying to convince the world she was innocent. But the world wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Outside the hospital, a crowd began forming, small at first, then growing as word spread. Parents, neighbors, and even Karen's own HOA members gathered along the sidewalk, talking loudly, pointing angrily toward the entrance where police stood guard. I knew she'd hurt someone eventually, one woman said, shaking her head. She's been unstable for years. They always protected her, a man replied. About time the truth came out. Even Karen's bridesmaids arrived in a cluster, their dresses wrinkled, eyeliner smudged, still shaken from the morning's events. One of them, the same girl who had bravely spoken up earlier, stepped in front of reporters with trembling hands. I'm not scared anymore, she said, voice cracking but firm. Karen abused people emotionally for years. Today she crossed the line. She hurt a child, and we all saw it. Cameras flashed. Microphones inched closer. The crowd erupted. And then the young man who recorded the video stepped forward. He looked nervous but determined. I have the footage, he said, holding up his phone. The reporter's microphone snapped toward him. A few hours later, the video was all over social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and even local news sites. It showed everything. Karen grabbing Ethan, her face twisted with hatred, slamming him against the wall, then storming away without a shred of remorse. The internet exploded. Comments poured in by the thousands. Arrest her now. Poor boy, I hope he's okay. Karen ruined her own wedding. Monstrous behavior. She needs jail time. I knew she was trouble. Even people from neighboring towns chimed in, shocked that a bride, on her wedding day, would physically attack a child. Meanwhile, inside Karen's private family circle, tensions erupted. Her new husband, the groom, who had waited patiently inside the chapel while Karen terrorized an 11-year-old, stormed into the hospital after being informed of the incident. His face was pale, eyes wide, hands shaking. When he saw Karen being questioned by police, he froze. Tell me, this isn't true, he whispered, voice cracking. Karen rushed toward him, grabbing his arm. Baby, listen, this is all a lie. The kid threw himself, the bridesmaids exaggerated, and someone edited the video. Karen, he said, gently pulling away. It's your voice on the video. Karen's jaw locked. Her eyes darted around the lobby in panic, searching for an escape route. You're going to believe them over your own wife? My wife, he repeated slowly, would never hurt a child. The silence that followed felt like a slap. Karen's face crumbled. Her groom stepped back, his expression filled with disappointment and disbelief. I don't even know who I married. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Karen standing alone in her ruined wedding gown, breath shaking, eyes wide with the realization that she had just lost everything in a single afternoon. Meanwhile, more neighbors began showing up inside the hospital, asking to speak to me. Some brought flowers for Ethan. Others apologized for the years they spent silent under Karen's rule. One elderly man wiped tears from his eyes as he said, "If we had spoken sooner, maybe she wouldn't have gotten this far." But one visitor stood out above all. A woman around her 40s approached me, hands trembling. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. "Something about Karen you probably don't know." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. This wasn't her first violent outburst. She's hurt people before. Why didn't anyone report her? I asked, voice tightening. "Because the HOA protected her," the woman whispered, "and because her family threatened anyone who tried to speak up." My stomach dropped. So, this wasn't an isolated moment. It was the result of years of unchecked aggression, years of the community being too afraid to push back. But now, with the video out, with witnesses speaking up, with the entire town watching, Karen no longer had the power to silence anyone. As the sun began to set, police officers returned to the hospital with updates. "More witnesses have come forward," one officer told me. "We're expanding the investigation. There's a lot more to this woman than we initially thought." And that was the moment I realized Karen's downfall was only just beginning. Her attack on my son had opened a door that could no longer be shut. And behind that door were secrets the entire community had been waiting years to expose. Secrets that would turn a simple assault case into something far bigger, far darker, and far more shocking than I ever imagined. The investigation into Karen's assault on Ethan escalated with a speed and intensity that even the police hadn't anticipated. By the next morning, detectives from the county sheriff's office arrived at our doorstep with stern faces, thick notepads, and a certainty that this case was far more complicated than a single moment of violence at a wedding. They spoke to me first, gathering every detail, every second of what I saw, what Ethan remembered, and what the witnesses had shared. The lead detective, a calm but sharp-eyed woman named Detective Hale, watched me closely as I described Ethan's injuries, his fear, his confusion, and the video capturing Karen's attack. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Sir, we believe your son might not be the only child she has harmed." My stomach tightened instantly. "What do you mean?" "We've received reports," the detective said darkly. "Anonymous tips, allegations from neighbors about past incidents, attempts to intimidate families, and some claims involving physical aggression toward minors." I felt anger rising in my chest again, not the sudden, explosive kind, but a slow, burning rage at the thought of other kids suffering because adults had been too scared to speak up. Why didn't anyone come forward before? I asked. Detective Hale sighed. Because Karen's family practically ran the HOA. Her father used fear like a weapon. People were threatened with fines, property seizures, even lawsuits. Some families moved away just to escape her. As the detectives left to interview more residents, I returned to Ethan's room. He was awake, sitting upright, a pillow tucked carefully behind his bruised back. He gave me a weak smile. "Dad, am I in trouble?" My heart cracked. "No, buddy," I said, sitting beside him. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're the brave one. You told the truth." Ethan's throat tightened as he nodded, trying not to cry. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. One of Karen's bridesmaids, the brave one who had spoken out, stepped in, holding a folded note in her trembling hands. "Mr. Hayes, I thought you should have this," she whispered. I unfolded the note. It wasn't addressed to me, it was addressed to her. In Karen's handwriting. "If you tell anyone what you saw, I will make sure you regret it. I will destroy you, your job, your family, your life. Stay quiet or else." I looked up sharply. "She gave this to you?" The bridesmaid nodded, tears in her eyes. 15 minutes before the ceremony. She said someone would pay if they messed up her wedding. I didn't know. I didn't know she meant your son. Rage pulsed through me again, but beneath it was something colder. Resolve. "Thank you for bringing this," I said. "It helps the investigation." When she left, I handed the note to Detective Hale, who had returned to gather evidence. Her eyes widened. This is a threat, and it proves intent. Over the next several hours, detectives questioned neighbors, former HOA members, former employees of Karen's at-home business, even old schoolmates who remembered her explosive temper. And one by one, horror after horror came out. A mother admitted Karen once grabbed her daughter's backpack and threw it into the street because the girl walked too close to her flowers. A teenage boy said Karen shoved him off a bike years ago during an argument about HOA speed limits. A former HOA treasurer confessed that Karen had screamed in her face for voting against a rule she proposed, then threatened to get her fired. But the most chilling revelation came when Detective Hale approached me hours later with a grim expression and a case file in her hands. "Sir," she said, "we found something." She handed me a picture, a blurry hospital photo of another child from 3 years earlier. A girl, maybe 10, injured, bruised, terrified. This girl told her parents she fell off a swing, Hale explained. But the parents now admit Karen grabbed her and pushed her after she accidentally stepped on Karen's lawn. I felt sick. "And you're sure it was Karen?" Hale nodded. Multiple witnesses confirmed it, but the family refused to press charges because Karen's father threatened to sue them for defamation. My hands curled into fists. "So she's done this before." "Many times," Hale said, "but you're the first parent who stood up publicly. And because of the video, people finally feel safe coming forward." By evening, the investigation deepened further when police obtained a warrant to search Karen's house. They discovered files, literal files, of residents she had marked for punishment, copies of HOA violation notices she had forged, photos of neighbors' children labeled with notes like "troublemaker," "too loud," "watch this one," and "find parents if needed." When that information hit the community, outrage erupted into full-blown fury. Crowds gathered at the HOA office demanding her removal. Parents rallied outside the police station demanding justice, and dozens of families messaged Detective Hale to provide statements. Karen had spent years building her kingdom of fear, and now it was collapsing around her like a burning tower. Meanwhile, Karen herself continued spiraling. That evening, she posted a live stream from her home, still in pieces from being questioned by police. She sobbed into the camera, claiming she was the real victim, that everyone was framing her, that the video was misunderstood, that Ethan attacked her first. The comments? Brutal. "You're finished. We saw the video. Jail is calling. Stop lying." But the investigation wasn't done. Not even close. Late that night, Detective Hale returned again, with a revelation that made my blood run cold. "We discovered something else," she said. "Something that explains why Karen exploded so violently. Something hidden in her past records." I swallowed. "What is it?" Hale took a breath. "Karen was involved in a sealed case years ago. A case involving another child. A serious case." My eyes widened. "What kind of case?" Hale met my gaze. "The kind that could change everything you think you know about her. And tomorrow we're unsealing it." My heart pounded. Because whatever this secret was, whatever the investigation had uncovered, it was the missing puzzle piece. The reason Karen snapped, the reason she targeted my son, the reason she tried so hard to silence everyone, and the truth waiting inside that sealed file would be the biggest twist of all. Detective Hale didn't return the next morning with urgency. She returned with gravity, like someone carrying a truth heavy enough to break a community in half. She asked to speak with me privately in a quiet room just outside Ethan's ward. Her expression was stern. But beneath that I sensed something else, disgust and pity. She placed a thick manila folder on the table and slid it toward me. "This was sealed for years," she began, "because someone powerful wanted it hidden. But yesterday's events forced a legal review, and the judge approved its release." My pulse thundered in my ears as I opened the file. Inside were photos, reports, statements from a case buried nearly 15 years earlier, and all of it centered around one name, Karen Hill, though back then she went by her maiden name, Karen Whitmore. The first photo nearly made my blood freeze. A small boy, maybe around 8, lying in a hospital bed with bruises along his cheek and arms. The report beneath it summarized everything in horrifying detail. Karen, at age 17, had attacked a child during a babysitting job. She grabbed the boy by the neck, shook him, shoved him against a dresser, and left him injured. She claimed the boy fell while playing, Hale explained quietly, but the bruising indicated otherwise. He survived? I asked, voice strained. Hale hesitated. Physically, yes. Emotionally, the records say he suffered trauma for years. My stomach twisted as I continued flipping through the pages. There were statements from the parents, terrified, angry, and desperate for justice. But the next document made my jaw clench in disbelief. Case closed. Insufficient evidence. Hale leaned forward. It wasn't insufficient evidence. Karen's father paid off the attorney, intimidated the family, and used his HOA political influence to bury it. So she got away with it. Completely, Hale confirmed. And it set a pattern. She learned early that she could attack children and walk free. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe through the rising rage. Why didn't this come out before? Hale tapped the file. Because her father had the record sealed, even law enforcement couldn't access them without a court order. She paused, but your son's case forced it open. The idea that Karen had a history of hurting children wasn't just shocking, it was nauseating. She wasn't just aggressive. She wasn't just controlling. She was dangerous. There's more, Hale said gently. I looked at her, heart pounding. More? She nodded and slid another document forward. This part we weren't expecting. I braced myself. Karen and the boy she injured, Hale said slowly, weren't strangers. I frowned. What do you mean? Hale exhaled. The boy she assaulted was her own half-brother. My breath caught. What? Her father had a second family, a secret one. When the truth came out, Karen reacted violently to the child, not because of anything he did, but because she hated the idea that her perfect life wasn't perfect anymore. A chill ran through me. She blamed the boy for exposing the affair? Yes, Hale said, and she inflicted severe harm out of spite. I felt my skin crawl. Karen had always acted like she was superior, entitled, untouchable, but this was cruelty at a level no one imagined. And sir, Hale added quietly, your son resembles that boy. Almost exactly. My heart stopped. Are you saying we believe, she continued, that when Karen saw Ethan she didn't see him? She saw that boy, the one she never faced justice for hurting, the one she blamed for her family's downfall. The room spun for a moment. My son, my innocent, gentle son, had been attacked because Karen's mind twisted the present into the past. So she projected her rage onto Ethan. I whispered. Yes, Hale confirmed. It explains her unusually violent reaction. The psychological trigger. The panic when she realized she'd done it again. I gripped the edge of the table. Does this help the case? Hale's gaze hardened. Sir, this transforms the case. She opened another document, a charging sheet. Given her history, the video evidence, the witness statements, and now the unsealed file, we're elevating the charge from misdemeanor assault to felony child endangerment and aggravated battery. My heart pounded with relief and shock. So she'll finally face consequences? Hale nodded. This time she won't escape. But the twists weren't over. Hale leaned closer. And the biggest revelation came this morning. She placed a DNA report in front of me. We ran an analysis on the old case file. The half-brother, the boy she injured, filed for a DNA test as an adult earlier this year. Turns out, his biological father isn't just Karen's father. My head snapped up. Who then? Hale swallowed. It's your son's stepteacher, Mr. Hollins. My mind reeled. What? Mr. Hollins dated Karen's mother years before she married Karen's father. The timelines overlap. It's complicated. My heart hammered. What does this have to do with Ethan? Hale lifted a second page. Mr. Hollins recognized Ethan's last name on the hospital intake and reached out to us. I blinked. Why? Hale spoke carefully. Because he believes your son may be distantly related through his mother's side. My chest tightened. My son, related to the boy Karen attacked? Hale nodded. Distantly. Barely. But when genetic traits are strong, resemblance happens. Suddenly, everything clicked. Karen's reaction, her panic, her desperation to erase the moment, her meltdown, her lies, her attack on the recording. Ethan didn't just remind her of the past. He reminded her of a boy whose existence exposed the deepest cracks in her family's facade. A boy tied to a secret affair that destroyed Karen's parents' marriage. A boy she hurt and never faced justice for. A boy who resembled Ethan closely enough to rip open her darkest guilt. Karen didn't just see a child near her dress. She saw the ghost of her past, a ghost she had tried to bury, a ghost she tried to silence again. And when she realized she had repeated the same violent act she committed as a teenager, she spiraled. "The judge has approved a court order," Hale said. "We're recommending full prosecution." I exhaled shakily. What happens next? Hale stood. "Next, we arrest her officially. And then the final chapter begins." As she left the room, file in hand, the air felt heavier but clearer. The truth was finally out. The pattern was finally exposed. And for the first time, justice felt within reach. But the storm wasn't over yet. Because Karen still had one last card to play, and the final showdown would be more explosive than anything so far. The day of Karen's official arrest unfolded like the final act of a long, brutal storm, the kind that destroys everything fake, everything rotten, and leaves behind only the truth. I arrived at the courthouse early in the morning, walking beside Ethan, who moved slowly with his arms wrapped protectively around his bruised ribs. The swelling on his face had gone down, but the emotional wounds were still raw, visible in the way he flinched at sudden sounds and clung to my sleeve when crowds grew too loud. As we approached the courthouse steps, people gathered on both sides, whispering, some in disbelief, others in anticipation. Karen's name had splashed across every local news channel overnight. HOA bride arrested for assaulting child, dark past uncovered. Cameras were already lined up, news vans parked along the street, reporters rehearsing segments in front of their microphones. This wasn't just a case anymore, it had become a symbol. A symbol of what happens when silence is finally broken. A symbol of a community rising against fear. And when Karen stepped out of the back of the police cruiser, still wearing her stained wedding gown, now wrinkled, dirty, and clinging to her like a ghost of the day she ruined, the crowd collectively gasped. Gone was her perfect makeup. Gone was her polished smile. Her hair was tangled, dark circles beneath her eyes, her veil ripped and hanging by a single thread. Yet, even in that state, she tried to straighten her posture, chin raised as if the world still belonged to her. "I didn't do anything," she screamed as officers held her arms. "This is a setup. You're all lying." But the world wasn't listening anymore. They had the truth, and the truth was louder than her voice. As Karen was escorted inside, dozens of parents stepped forward with candles, photos, and signs representing children she had bullied, intimidated, or harmed over the years. Some held signs reading, "Justice for our kids," while others held handwritten letters describing their own encounters with Karen, letters they had been too afraid to show before. The moment Karen saw the crowd, her face twisted, and she tried to pull away from the officers. "You can't do this to me," she screamed. "I am the HOA president." Not anymore," one officer said sharply. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Karen sat at the defendant's table, shackled, trembling with rage. Her groom, the man who had left her at the hospital, sat in the back row, face pale, hands clasped together, staring at her with nothing but heartbreak and betrayal. When Karen saw him, she began sobbing hysterically. Baby, tell them I'm not a monster. Tell them I didn't mean to." He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. It was over. The judge entered moments later, his expression stern, and the courtroom fell silent. "We are here regarding the case of Karen Whitmore Hill, charged with felony child endangerment, aggravated battery of a minor, obstruction of justice, issuing threats, and the reopening of a sealed juvenile violence case." Karen's mouth fell open. "Reopening? You can't," she shouted. "I was a child. You were 17, the judge corrected. Old enough to understand right from wrong." The prosecution began presenting the evidence: the video of Karen slamming Ethan into the wall, the witness statements, the bridesmaid's written threat note, the old case file containing the attack on her half-brother, the HOA intimidation records, and photos of other victims. Karen's lawyer tried desperately to twist the narrative, claiming she was emotionally overwhelmed, that she reacted instinctively, that she suffered from delayed trauma, but the judge remained unmoved. Then it was my turn. My legs felt weak as I stood, but Ethan squeezed my hand and whispered, "You can do it, Dad." I faced the courtroom, my voice steady but thick with emotion. My son is gentle, kind, quiet, and never hurt anyone. He came to a wedding with love and respect, and left with injuries he didn't deserve. And while physical bruises heal, the emotional ones don't vanish. Not quickly, not easily, not when a grown woman, a bride, chose violence over decency. Karen didn't just shove my son. She shattered something inside him. And for years, she hurt countless others. This is not about revenge. This is about stopping someone who should have been stopped a long time ago. By the time I finished, several parents in the courtroom were wiping their eyes. Even Ethan leaned against me, silent tears falling down his cheeks. The judge gave him a soft, sympathetic look before turning back to Karen. Her face was red, shaking, her hands gripping the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Karen Whitmore Hill," the judge said, voice cold, "you have shown a pattern of violence, manipulation, and cruelty spanning more than a decade. You injured minors, terrorized families, and used your authority to silence anyone who spoke out." Karen shook her head, violently. "No, please, this is my life, my future, my image. Your actions," the judge interrupted firmly, "destroyed your image. And now, justice demands consequences." The courtroom held its breath. "I hereby sentence you to 12 years in state prison, mandatory counseling, community restitution, and permanent removal from all HOA positions. You are also prohibited from contact with any minors, including the victim." Karen screamed, a raw, animalistic sound, as officers lifted her from the table. She kicked, sobbed, begged, but the sentence stood firm. Her groom stood up slowly, watched her with hollow eyes, then whispered, "Goodbye, Karen," before turning and walking out of the courtroom forever. Outside, the community waited. When we stepped into the sunlight, Ethan holding my hand, the crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in relief. Parents hugged each other. Children held signs that read, "Thank you, Ethan, and brave boy." A woman approached us, tears in her eyes. "Your son saved more than himself," she said softly. "He saved all of us." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen since the attack. "Hope." "Dad," he whispered, "is it over?" I kneeled down, placed my hands on his shoulders, and smiled through my own tears. "Yes, buddy, it's finally over." And for the first time since that horrible day, we both felt the weight lift. If the story moved you, broke your heart, or reminded you why we must always stand up for the innocent, then don't leave without supporting this channel. Comment below which city you're watching from, and share your thoughts about the justice Ethan received. And before you go, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another emotional, powerful story like this. Your support helps these stories reach more people and keeps our community strong. Thank you for watching.